Do you have a really nice piece of gold jewelry at home? Do you have a really nice watch? Do you have a piece of art or an object that you think is a collector's item and in years will be worth a lot of money? Now this is maybe not so much a trend amongst young people in today's day and age, particularly with stuff like crypto, NFTs, and online investing being strongly promoted. But there is perhaps still a market for people who look at such kind of objects as investments. But if you are interested in rare objects and precious metals as investments, is it really a good investment and are you going to get your money's worth? Well, that's what I'm going to discuss in today's video. I'm going to give you my thoughts and my opinion on alternative investments. So let's get right into the video. Welcome to Millennials with Money. My name is Johnny. So the thoughts I'm going to share in this video are mainly going to be relevant when you think of things like gold or silver jewelry, when you think of luxury watches, when you think of artwork as collectibles or collectible objects, for example. So I've got 6 points I want to cover in this video, and each of these points is food for thought, if you like, something that you need to take into account if you're considering investing in alternative investments. And by the end of this video, you should have a good idea of whether alternative investments are for you or if there may be something that you should steer clear of. So let's get right into it. So point number one is a universal rule of investing. It applies just as much to collectibles as it applies to stocks, ETFs, crypto, etc. And it's to understand what you're investing in. Now, if we think about this general rule, it's basically thinking about what is it you're buying, what functions does it have, what value does it have, what value might someone else see in it, how does its value change over time, does it appreciate, does it depreciate, and what kind of return can you expect when you sell it, and what is your selling point, how do you sell it, where? When it comes to assets like stocks or index funds, it's a lot more clear-cut because you've either got the idea that the stock market will increase over time, so you can expect an exit at a higher point, generally speaking. If you're investing in stocks, if the company performs well, then you might expect an appreciation in the stock's value, or if it doesn't, then a depreciation. But when it comes to collectibles, it's not so clear-cut. Maybe in the case of gold and silver jewelry, where the prices are linked to the value of a commodity like gold or silver, which is something that we'll come back to a bit later on. But when we're talking about things like a luxury watch, when we're talking about a rare piece of art, it's all very much subject to what the next person is willing to pay for it. So it's really important to understand what it is you're investing in and how the next person might see value in it and why they might want to buy it. And that leads me nicely into the second point, which is all about uniqueness, or how rare what it is you have is. I'm going to use the example of watches to demonstrate this point. So you have low-cost watches, you have kind of mid-range watch brands, you know, maybe like Tissot or Hamilton, and then you've got luxury brand watches like would be Rolex or Patek Philippe. When you think about these different types of watches, a Hamilton watch and a Tissot are both generally very nice watches, and you can expect to pay quite a bit of money for one of them, a decent bit of money at least anyways. However, they are at the end of the day mid-range watches, so there are going to be a lot of them produced and they're not going to be so rare. However, when you think about a Rolex or a Patek Philippe, currently you've even got people on waiting lists to get certain models of Rolex, and there's not so many of them made. So naturally, some of these Rolex models, some of these Patek Philippe models, they're a lot more rare. So someone might be willing to pay a lot more to have them in the future. So the more rare, the more unique an item is, then it probably means that in the future it'll have a greater value. Point number 3 is critical if you're thinking about investing in alternative investments, and if you can't check off this point, then you can pretty much forget it, and that is the condition of the object. Naturally, when you look at the condition of objects that are sold, something that's in good or okay condition is not going to sell for as much as something that is in very good or perfect or mint condition. Particularly when you're thinking of your jewelry or your watch or your art or collectibles as an asset, then you need to keep them in absolutely pristine condition for them to hold their value. If they're not even the smallest scratch, if there's a bit of damage to the box, even in some cases, it might be that an investor in the future or a potential buyer looks at it and says, you know what, no, I don't like the condition of this, and it might put them off the purchase, and then you might not even get a positive return on your investment as a result. So it's really important that you look after any jewelry, any watches, any collectibles that you want to sell or you're thinking of selling at some point in the future for a profit. That means making sure they're stored correctly, that they're cleaned, that they're maintained correctly if that's necessary, so that they stay in that tip-top condition and you do have the best chance of making a positive return when you look to sell them later on. Point number 4 is particularly important in the context of jewelry, which is the seller's markup. Now, let's say you go and buy a gold chain, a gold necklace, a gold ring, for example. Yes, what you pay for that object is largely going to be linked to the price of gold at that point in time. However, what you pay for that piece of jewelry is not going to be the spot price of gold multiplied by the weight of the object. No, the seller is obviously going to put their markup on it because they need to make a profit as well. And in some cases, that can be quite a hefty markup. So you need to take into account any markup that the seller might be making off this sale. You need to keep that in mind in terms of your potential returns that you're looking at getting in the future. And that leads me into point number 5, which is you should think of these as long-term investments, because if you would sell that gold necklace right after you bought it, you would make a loss because of that seller's markup. And when we talk about long-term investment here, whether for gold or silver, but also for the other types of alternative investments that I've touched on in this video, it's definitely going to be a long-term investment. It's going to be probably decades before you start to see any major appreciation in value of the object that you've bought. So that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Now, the price of gold and silver do fluctuate over time, so that is something you need to keep in mind as well, if that's a risk you're willing to take based on the commodity price. But because they're linked to a commodity price, if the price of those commodities go up over time, then there is a point that you will make a profit based on the price of gold exceeding what you've paid for the object plus the seller's markup. So there is potential for a positive increase. When you look at the price of gold, it has typically gone up over time, and it makes significant gains typically in inflationary periods or in times of economic hardship. So in those times are probably when you're going to see the greatest appreciation on your gold if you have it. Now, whereas we've said gold and silver are typically linked to commodity prices, so it's a little bit easier to predict their future value. When we think about art, and we think about collectibles, and we think about watches, it's all very high risk. This is point number 6, that investing in these kind of objects is very high risk, and it's something that kind of touched on throughout the video. It's all very unknown. Sure, we can take into account the previous points, and if you can check off most of them, then there's a good indication that there might be some opportunity for appreciation in value or a profit further down the line. But at the end of the day, this is all very high risk. You know, you never know what somebody is willing to pay for it in the future. You never know if someone even will be willing to pay for it in the future. There's a risk that you might not even find a buyer. There's a risk that what you thought was a rare object might turn out not to be so rare or unique. So the point I'm making here is it's all very unknown. You could buy something that could double, triple, quadruple in value, or you could buy something that in decades is worth nothing. So taking all these points into account, would I or would I not invest in alternative investments? Well, as we've said, it requires a high amount of risk, and to get something incredibly rare and to look after it, keep it in pristine condition, it's going to take a significant financial outlay. It's going to require a lot of investment and a lot of money, which, although yes, there is the potential for big returns down the line, it's very much a high risk investment. And personally speaking as well, I'm not sure that I understand all the intricacies and all the details of some of these alternative investments. So it's not something I would buy as an investment. I would, however, consider, you know, buying maybe a nice watch or a quality piece of jewelry for personal use, for me to enjoy. You know, it's not gonna make me rich. It's not an investment. It probably won't appreciate in value, but it probably will retain most of its value, and it's a quality item. I would consider buying some of them for my personal use. However, I don't feel like I have the specific knowledge of some of these rare objects, of watches, of jewelry, to be able to consider buying them as an investment. I hope you found this discussion interesting. Leave a comment and let me know, have you purchased any alternative investments and what did you buy? Now, why not check out my other videos? And if you're not yet subscribed and you want to see more content like this, then make sure you hit the subscribe button with the notification bell so you don't miss a single update. I'll see you on the next one. and let's get this money.